It's been the great experiment, how to assess children who haven't been in school, who, to control a disease, might be forced out of school at any point. A question which boils down to whether or not they should sit their exams next summer. Not for the first time in this pandemic, different things are happening in different parts of the UK. Wales has cancelled all their exams, replaced with in-classroom assessments, while Scotland has done the same with their equivalent of GCSEs. Northern Ireland and England have both deferred exams by several weeks, but not cancelled any. But the argument goes that that's not fair, given all the time missed, both in spring and less commonly appreciated now. English secondary school attendance for last week stands at 87%, better than some feared, but that's still down on where it should be, and 3,000 schools have 30 or more pupils self-isolating, many of those schools likely concentrated in the north of England. But plenty want exams to go ahead. These students at St Dominic's Sixth Form College in Harrow saw what happened to the year above this summer, saw how arbitrary the system which replaced exams was. They want to keep the control exams give them.
The only thing every year that we know is a guarantee is that we'll have our exams and we'll get reliable, good results from them.
How many of you want to do the exams?
I'd say all of us.
Everyone.
To an extent, we are prepared, and it might not be the same for the rest nationally, but I think everyone is different, and as a college we can say that I think we are ready, and I think taking the exams would reflect our potential more than getting predicted grades.
Sure.
So I think that that's why majority of the students here would prefer to take the exams.
This is a school which has kept its attendance up, kept COVID out, but the head here is aware that not all have been so lucky.
Now is the time, particularly with the announcement in Wales today, for a national conversation to make sure that there is parity across the United Kingdom. I think that's really important. We have a national examination system, and I think that national conversation between the devolved powers needs to happen now.
Indeed, teachers spoken to by Newsnight today reflect the division across the country. One said,
"At one point, 170 out of 240 students were isolating, and some are currently isolating for the third time. Teacher assessment is the only fair and moral option."
Another said,
"There is no way for the exams to run successfully and fairly. Pupils are being forced off for large periods of time. Additionally, many could actually miss the exam day itself, either through having to isolate or being unwell." And another,
"I have 50 Year 11s off at the moment, isolating. The whole year group has been off twice already. So 4 weeks of lost teacher time just this year. The exam boards have essentially made no changes to the content, so no idea how exams running as normal can be fair."
Something which could bring teachers together are changes to how much is actually examined.
The other possibility is that we say we'll only have some exams. So a typical A-level might have 3 papers. Well, we don't need to necessarily to do all 3 papers. So we could have a blend of some exams, some teacher assessment. We could also say that we won't have exams in all the subjects, just in some of them. So there are various possibilities, and it's really important that we look at all of them and we make sure that we understand the implications of each, not just on the whole cohort, but on particularly those students who are likely to be disadvantaged.
This is a divisive subject which splits the education profession, often on the basis of school, type of cohort, where that cohort and school is. But there is one source of agreement, that whatever is to be done needs to be done quickly. That the nightmare scenario is getting to the spring, beyond the spring, and for the Department for Education to change the system at the last minute. In other words, what the system needs most of all is what has been in shortest supply: consistency. This is a year group perhaps even more unusual than the last. They end every school day aware that all they've learned might no longer be needed. All they're working for might change when the next school day begins anew. In this strange age of ours, it is our youngest wading through uncertainty at its worst.
Lewis Goodall, thank you. We invited the government on the programme, but they declined. Joining me now are Conservative MP David Simmons, a member of the Education Select Committee, and Rebecca Poole, head teacher of Hampton High School in Middlesex. Welcome to you both. Rebecca, if I may start with you. Can you see why the Welsh Government have scrapped exams?
So I think that I can see why they've made a decision. They've obviously consulted widely and had a look at what is going on and the implications of that. and action needed to be taken really rapidly, I think, so that students and teachers know what is being expected of them. We do need to ensure that we have a very fair and level playing field. We've not just got the gaps through lockdown that we are busy filling, but also that's compounded somewhat by the content that we're now teaching, and also the issues that have been raised through inequality and access. So I can absolutely understand why decisions are now being taken, and I think it's very helpful because it's brought this whole issue back into the spotlight. And now what we're looking at are obviously students who are also in self-isolation. We have staff who are in self-isolation, and I think we're in danger of seeing really vulnerable students who were vulnerable during the first lockdown, who might become even more vulnerable through this lockdown as well.
So let me ask you then, do you think it's fair for exams to take place next summer in the current form in England?
So I think the situation at the moment is that some amendments have been made to the way that children are going to be assessed, but broadly speaking, the content has stayed the same. And I think, given that we're talking about quite a long period where children have been out of education, and whilst, yes, they've been learning online, accessing something on a mobile phone is not quite the same as accessing it, for example, on a tablet. So there's an issue there around equality of access. And so I think some real consideration needs to be given about how these children can really demonstrate what they can do. And we mustn't forget that these children have got years and years of learning behind them, but also to acknowledge that we're operating in very, very challenging times.
Let's bring in David at this point, because can you hear anything in this situation, especially what we're also hearing in our report there, that would make you think exams should be cancelled in 2021 in England?
Examinations are a great leveller, and I think what we heard from young people is reflected in the evidence. We know that particularly for youngsters who are vulnerable, who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, tend to get better results in external examinations than they've got historically in centre assessed grades. So it's important in regular time. So it's really important. And it would have been true this year as well if we looked at the outcomes for the algorithm that was used to give predicted grades versus what schools had predicted. So it is important to try and make sure that those exams go ahead. And as we've just heard, the government has made efforts, and we've heard a lot of evidence at the Education Select Committee from ministers about this, by changing the timing of exams, by shifting the order of exams to give the maximum possible chance for that to go ahead. But of course, we have to recognise there's a lot of uncertainty with COVID. I think it's right we press ahead with trying to make sure that children have that chance, but there needs to be a good backup plan in place. And the autumn series of exams for GCSEs that were taking place that for students who perhaps were going to resit after what would have happened in the summer, those have been run by schools very successfully this autumn. So it has been proven that schools can do those exams even under the lockdown conditions that are prevailing.
But the Welsh Education Minister said that they can't provide an even playing field. So how can England?
Well, Wales is also going for a form of externally moderated exams. So there has been some debate, and we've seen it in the media today, about whether what's been announced is the cancellation of exams or just exams in a different form. But the key thing to remember is that in England, we see a lot more transition, particularly for students at the age of 16. 71% of children in England change educational institution at 16, and that's not the case in Wales and Scotland. So those exams are really important both to the youngsters themselves, to meet their aspirations and to validate the efforts they put in so far, and also to the institutions that they're moving on to, so they know that they're ready to start those courses.
But there's a recognition by you here that there is an issue around missed work, missed insights, what we've just been hearing there. It's a 3-week delay, but when you look at what the National Foundation for Educational Research puts out in terms of the gap right now, at the end of the summer, students were around 3 months behind expectations, and that widened when they were looking at those in the poorest schools. How is 3 weeks enough?
Well, certainly head teachers in my patch and head teachers nationally have been telling us that what they want to see is that 3-week delay. They think that will allow them, with the efforts that they've got in place, with the extra resources that have been put in to enable catch-up, to give those young people a really fair chance when those exams happen. But we need to have those contingency plans as well, and we need to make sure that there's that balance in the system. Young people are saying they want the chance to really demonstrate what they can do, and the best way to do that is to do those proper exams that they would normally. If they can't do that, Plan B
hopefully
needs to
Rebecca
be
is in your patch. You're her MP. Rebecca, is 3 weeks, not to make this awkward, I don't know if you met before, but is 3 weeks actually enough to carry out the same exams, essentially?
3 weeks would not be enough to carry out the same exams. And actually, I belong to a large group of head teachers up and down the country, and we really want to be part of the dialogue, part of the solution. And what might work, and it would need to be discussed, would be something along the lines of: you take it down to one exam in all of the subjects, you have some degree of optionality, because the other thing we have to bear in mind is that before lockdown, students, even if they were studying the same syllabus, may well have studied different topics in different orders. And so
reducing the number of exams, but wouldn't that actually be limiting children's education and not giving them the greatest chance and the greatest breadth?
I think if we had something factored in that went along the lines of some moderated, with very clear criteria, assessment around teacher assessment or teacher judgment that played into that and were a part of that as well, I think something like that would be quite helpful. There are lots and lots of ideas.
And just, if I may, how quickly would you need to know that by?
Well, we would need to know pretty quickly, because we've got to set the systems up. We have to prepare the students properly.
Let's put this to David, if I may, just in terms of, is there going to be a change in England? Because we've heard from Number 10, no change today, but we've seen things have had to move. What do you read that as the situation? Well,
it's not my constituency, but certainly head teachers in my constituency have told me that they think the approach of the 3-week delay has been a helpful one. But what we've heard, and we heard it this morning at the Education Select Committee from the head of Ofsted, is she's very, very concerned about the impact on young people of exams being cancelled next year. She wants to see the government make all possible efforts to give young people that chance. I agree with that. That's certainly what I hear from young people. But I think it is something that we need to keep under review, because we need to recognise, with all the uncertainties that exist around COVID...
Under review, though, you know, there's a deadline with UCAS, in January.
Well, Ofcall have already been given that instruction some time ago to look at what that Plan B would look like. But, of course, we need to see how the COVID situation develops. And the concern, of course, we all have, is that there are risks to the alternative approaches as well, that some groups are particularly disadvantaged by centre-assessed grades, by teacher assessment. And we need to recognise that this is not a situation where this has benefits for everybody. There'll be a negative impact on some students of the approach that's been taken in Wales. So we need to look at what is the thing that gives our young people the fairest possible chance.
But fast is the message as well. Thank you very much to both of you for your time.